Welcome to the very first session of our Discipleship Journey video series. This series is crafted to stimulate and assist you in gathering around the concept of making disciples in the manner of Jesus. Today, we'll delve into the method and strategy Jesus employed to make disciples. In Western Christianity, we're often well versed in the words of Jesus, the things that he said about himself and the kingdom. We're also reasonably adept in understanding his works, the miracles and the actions that he performed. We speak about his acts of mercy, justice and power, forgiveness and healing. However, we're largely overlooked Jesus' ways, the methods by which he set a movement in motion, starting with the few for the sake of the many, creating disciples who would in turn make more disciples. Jesus didn't begin with what we now recognize as the church or even specific programs. Instead, he started with a select few, discipling them towards placing their trust in him. He used a unique blend of invitation and challenge, resulting in what we now understand as discipleship. This wasn't a process of osmosis. It was deeply intentional with growth and multiplication as the natural byproduct. To understand Jesus' way of making disciples, we can look to the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. After his baptism, where Jesus' identity as God's Son was declared over his life, his very first activity in his earthly ministry was to be led by the Spirit in prayer. Initially, this led him into the wilderness to be tempted by the enemy. But prayer and being led by the Spirit became the guiding force of his life and his ways. When it comes to making disciples, prayer must be our very first port of call, asking God, where are you already at work? We also see that Jesus meaningfully identified and engaged with what the Bible calls people of peace, a concept that we're going to explore in greater depth in our very next session. We see in Mark chapter 1 that as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come and follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and they followed him. It was no coincidence that he connected with the fishermen Simon Peter and his brother Andrew. They were already known to him, with Andrew being an initial disciple of his cousin John the Baptist. Jesus followed relational pathways, connecting with those who were already in his world, and those in whom he had discerned the Spirit of God was already at work. Despite being ordinary, unschooled fishermen, Jesus started where God was already active and worked from there. Finally, Jesus embodied and utilized a series of identifiable and reproducible ways by which he progressed the relationship. He moved from casual to meaningful to spiritual, to a place where he could reveal the kingdom. We're going to dive deeper into these methods in upcoming sessions. In essence, the discipling process was in situ. Simon and his brother Andrew were quickly joined by brothers James and John, and they collectively came to come and see who this Jesus was. When he had gone a little farther, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in the boat preparing their nets. Without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men, and they followed him. The disciple-making process was fluid, it was rapid, and it was devoid of any classroom or programmatic orientation. So as we embark on this journey together, I ask you, where is God inviting you to inhabit some of Jesus' ways, rather than simply focusing upon his words and his works? Where is he calling you to make disciples as Jesus did? Where is he already at work in your life, inviting you to cooperatively step into his mission? I remember a recent personal experience where I realized that God was at work in my life and in that of a new friend. We often ran together discussing the deeper aspects of life. He asked spiritual questions and was warm towards me and my family. Perhaps I was a bit slow on the uptake, but God was already active in his life. I simply needed to pay attention to where God was working and invest differently, just as Jesus did in making disciples who make disciples. This realization serves as a poignant reminder that God is constantly at work around us, often in ways that we may not immediately recognize. It challenges us to be more attuned to the spiritual rhythms in our everyday interactions and relationships. Just as Jesus was intentional in his approach to discipleship, we too are called to be deliberate in our engagement with others, always seeking opportunities to nurture spiritual growth and understanding. The beauty of Jesus' method lies in its simplicity and adaptability. He didn't require elaborate programs or formal educational settings. Instead, he met people where they were, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. He engaged with them in their daily lives, using their familiar surroundings and experiences as teaching moments. This approach reminds us that discipleship isn't confined to church buildings or to formal Bible studies. It can happen during a morning run, over a cup of coffee, or in the midst of life's everyday challenges. As we continue this journey, we'll explore more deeply how we can emulate Jesus' ways in our very own discipleship efforts. We'll learn to recognize the people of peace in our own lives, those individuals who are receptive to spiritual conversations and open to exploring faith. We'll discover how to progress relationships from casual encounters to meaningful spiritual connections. And we'll examine how to create environments where others can come and see Jesus through our lives and our communities. Remember, Jesus' approach to discipleship was not about creating a select group of religious experts. It was about transforming ordinary individuals, fishermen, tax collectors, and others from all walks of life into bearers of the good news. This transformation wasn't just about imparting information, it was about life-on-life imitation. The disciples learned by watching Jesus, by doing what he did, and by gradually taking on his character and his mission. As we embark on this journey of discovery and implementation, let's challenge ourselves to move beyond merely knowing about Jesus to actually doing what Jesus did. Let's be attentive to the Spirit's leading, open to the relationships that God is bringing into our lives, and intentional about investing in others as Jesus invested in his disciples. This journey of discipleship is not always easy. It's definitely not straightforward. It requires patience, perseverance, and a willingness to step outside of our comfort zones. But as we faithfully follow Jesus' ways, we participate in the exciting adventure of seeing lives transformed and communities renewed by the power of the gospel. And so as we finish this very first session, I encourage you to reflect on your own life and surroundings. Where might God already be at work in your life? Who are the people of peace in your sphere of influence? How can you begin to intentionally invest in these relationships, following Jesus' model of discipleship? Let's pray for discernment, courage, and a wisdom as we seek to make disciples in the ways of Jesus. May we be ever mindful of his words, inspired by his works, and transformed by his ways. And as we do, we'll find ourselves participating in the very mission of God, bringing his kingdom to earth, one relationship at a time.